Hello and welcome to day 4 of class. So today we need to talk about something called close reading. Now, quick note, whenever I say the word reading, I don't necessarily mean picking up a book and looking at the words. When I say reading, I mean making meaning. So anything that you can derive a message out of, anything that you can make meaning out of, you're reading it. So this could be a picture, it could be a style of dress, it could be a movie. It's anything with rhetoric, because through rhetoric, as you know, is how we communicate. So anything with rhetoric you can make a meaning out of, which means you can pretty much read anything. So we need to talk about close reading. So reading some sort of text, and when I say text, I mean anything with rhetoric, movies, songs, etc. So reading any kind of text closely and with intent. So reading and writing are usually intertwined. A lot of times whenever you're writing, you are responding to some kind of reading, to some kind of meaning that you have. So writing does not occur in a vacuum. Writing is usually asking you to converse with the reading. And you can think of almost any document, any reading that you do in school or that you do outside that was created in response to some kind of text. So for example, Declaration of Independence. It was created in response to unfair ruling. Songs. There's a song by Janelle Monáe called Kelly Tombelt, and that's created in response to killing unarmed black people. So all texts are created to respond to something or for some reason. They're never created for no reason. There's always some kind of back pressure that's pushing that creation forward. So, whenever you begin writing, you are responding to something. So allow yourself to engage with the material. Allow yourself to engage with the text. So that means you need to allow yourself to have reactions to the text. Notice your reactions and keep track of them. So if you remember when you guys read How to Mark a Book for the pretest, use those different techniques that Adler talked about. Underline, circle, write in the margins. If it's a PDF, you can always keep a little document off to the side. I think that was also in the reading. Just have a piece of paper off to the side that you annotate on, that you write things down on. So keep track of your reactions because you might want those later. Write down your thoughts, your responses. You might want those later. Those can be really useful to your writing when you get to that stage. Also, when you read or when you make meaning about something, think about the language. Think about how the text is getting its meaning across. Particularly with words. Words are unstable. So when I say this means that meaning changes over time. You guys all know this. Slang shows the instability of words. Words that go out of style or words that are considered archaic, that we don't really use anymore. It's unstable. Language changes. And while words are unstable, while language changes, it is very powerful because our reality is shaped by the words we use. Just as an example, phrases that change reality. I now pronounce you husband and wife. That changes the reality for someone. Honey, I'm pregnant. That changes somebody's reality. Or you could even think, if you're religious, you could think back to let there be light. Boom, reality's changed. So the words that we say, the language that we use, does shape the way we see the world and the way we exist in the world. So while language and words are unstable, they are incredibly powerful. You also need to consider the person who is creating the text. Words and language and the way we use them changes depending on our background experiences, depending on our life situation, depending on our ideologies or belief system, depending on all these different things. It changes how we see the world and how we use words. As an example, just humor me here. Close your eyes, and I'm going to say a word, and I want you to picture the word I say. Okay, all your eyes are closed now. The word I want you to picture. Bird. Okay, you all have a bird. All right. Keep your eyes closed. Now I'm going to give you a phrase, and I want you to pay attention to the bird. Okay. I went to the park to feed the birds. Okay, you can open your eyes now. So, whenever I first said the word bird, lots of people picture blue jays or cardinals. Some people picture eagles or hawks. Some people picture pigeons. Some people picture ducks, peacocks, bird, cockatoos. Whenever I said I went to the park to feed the birds, a lot of times people's idea of birds suddenly shifts because of the context that the word is used in. So a lot of times people's blue jay will change into pigeons. A lot of times people's cockatoo is going to turn into ducks or something like that. Very rarely, if the original bird you thought of was like hawk, very rarely do people picture themselves going to the park with little chunks of meat in their pocket to feed the hawks. That's not typically what people think of. So again, language, words, context, all these things have a bearing on each other. So when you are reading, making meaning, notice the words being used and notice how they interact with each other and think about the author, why they might be saying the things that they're saying. Knowing who the author is important in some cases. Of course, you know from the first video that that interpretation is more important than intent. Sometimes it can still be important to think about the intent. So there's no hard and fast rule for writing. Sometimes you want to think about intent, sometimes it doesn't matter. So just keep all that in mind. And also keep in mind the effective habits of mind that we talked about the other day too. So when you're interacting with a reading, allowing yourself to have reactions, keeping track of your thoughts, etc., all good, but also make sure you suspend your judgment to a point. So allow yourself to be open to those uncertainties, to questions that you may have. Find the patterns, be open to finding those, notice the anomalies, ask those questions that really lead you to a good analysis. And that pinnacle question, the zenith, that question you always need to ask is why. So keep on asking why as you are reading. Why did the author choose that word? Why did they arrange a sentence like this? So on and so forth. So keep on asking why. And this is how you start getting to close reading. So do all that. And like I said, understand maybe where the author is coming from. Also understand the context. Again, writing does not occur in a vacuum. It's always reacting to something. And a lot of times it's reacting to something societal. So think about the context. Think about the time that it came from. For example, there's an essay written by Jonathan Swift called A Modest Proposal. That was written in response to Great Britain, which ruled Ireland at the time. Jonathan Swift was Irish. It was in response to Great Britain ruling Ireland and not doing anything about all the people who were starving and dying and the overpopulation. So Jonathan Swift wrote this essay that, that basically said, well, we're starving, we're overpopulated, so let's eat babies. That's what the whole entire essay is about. It was in response to the way that Ireland was being ruled by Great Britain. Was he serious about eating babies? No, of course not. But it got the attention of Great Britain, and it was written particularly in response to how they were being ruled. So consider the context, consider what's going on in the culture, in the society, and why that writing might have been called into existence. And when you do this also, think about lenses. So lenses are basically ways of seeing. Just like when you go to the eye doctor, you know, they ask you what looks better, A or B. And then eventually you get your pair of glasses with your specific lenses for how you see. So same thing, lenses when you're analyzing are ways of seeing. So you can think of all these different angles basically, kind of like the facets of a diamond. It's all one thing, but depending on how the light hits, depending on what you focus on, you see something a little bit different. So you can focus on things like socioeconomics. So the hierarchy in society, people who are wealthy, people who are not wealthy, people in the middle. You can think of those types of things. You can think about race or ethnicity, how that affects the writing. You can think about gender, how that affects the writing. You can think about sexuality, how that affects the writing. You can think about education. You can think about family relationships. You can think about geography. You can think about politics. Like, all these different things have some kind of bearing on the writing, how it's called into existence, and what it's reacting to. So context is very important, and the way you contextualize, the way you see it, is also very important to what your reactions will be and how you will engage with that reading and thus write about it. So lenses are incredibly important. We'll talk more about those as time goes on, because I really do want you guys to kind of like engage those different angles. So brief introduction to them, just keep them in mind, play with them, see what happens when you do. So suspending your judgment, asking those questions. Also uncover assumptions within the reading and track the binaries. So binaries are two extremes. Two binaries are two extremes. So this is like good, bad, yes, no, mine, yours. We kind of talked about this already. So track the binaries. If you're reading a text and it talks about men and women, suddenly you've uncovered an assumption and have noticed a binary. So the assumption is that there are only men and women. The binary is men and women. What about everything that doesn't fit those binaries? What about people who are trans? What about people who are agender? What about people who are intersex? Okay, so it's an assumption that you've noticed in the reading, and you've also noticed the binary. What kind of things upset the binary? What in the language maybe shows a contradiction in what the author is saying? So again, really thinking deeply about these things and picking it apart. Thinking critically. Seeing those nuances that might be hard to detect until you really start looking, start searching, start analyzing. So when you do stuff like this, it can help you to create tension within the text. And tension is good. Whenever there's tension, whenever there's contradiction, those are the types of things that you want to write about, because that gives you a reason to write. And that reason could be to try to resolve tension, or that reason could be to just reveal some kind of disparity in what the author is saying. So you can think of the tension basically as back pressure. And back pressure always pushes something forward. So you want that pressure because that's what's going to help you propel your writing. So look for those tensions, those contradictions, and use them to push your writing forward. So last thing, close reading, what we've been talking about, you can basically boil it down to focusing really hard on a small part of the writing or of the text. So in like a book or whatever, it could be a sentence, it could be a short passage, it could be a single word. And you might derive all sorts of meanings, all sorts of ideas from that small piece. If you tried to close read an entire novel, you would end up writing like several dissertations, several books about the novel. For our purposes, in this class, when you close read, you are going to use a very small section. Even if you're analyzing a song, choose something small. Choose a verse, a stanza. Choose just, a small piece that you can get a lot from and like generate a lot of questions about, and therefore move to a bunch of different ideas, but you don't want to do the whole thing. And again, this is important to keep in mind, because this will also reinforce looking for patterns. Because if you find a pattern, you can focus on the pattern. And it might happen throughout, but you're focusing on one small thing, which is that pattern. So always look for those patterns too. Just keep that in mind. Close reading. We're going to be doing that a lot in this class. Just keep in mind that authors come from a certain context. Writing in text usually is responding to a certain societal event or some kind of context. It doesn't occur in a vacuum. And you can analyze, you can make meaning from anything that has rhetoric. So you can close read almost anything. Another good tip is if you're trying to close read something and understand it differently or in a new light, try putting it in your own words. That helps you understand it better and might help you push your ideas forward. And also keep in mind that reading doesn't necessarily have one single point. Depending on what your interests are and so on and so forth, you might get something different from the reading. Response to reading is not a summary. You are not telling me what happened. If I want to know what happened, I'll go back and read it myself. I want to know your thoughts. Expand and speculate on the ideas when you read. So if you're reading theory or even reading fiction, if there's an idea presented, you can take that idea and be like, okay, what if this happened? Or to extend that idea and maybe apply it to my life. This is how it works. I do that sometimes when I'm reading like pedagogy books or when I was in college reading books. Like, how does this philosophical idea apply to my life? How does it apply to my classroom? So on and so forth. So speculate, expand on those ideas. Make connections. So again, looking for patterns or connecting it to your life or connecting it to other readings. Always look for ways that you can tie things together. So again, nothing occurs in a vacuum. There will be connections. Societal connections are always really interesting. So also keep society in mind, things that are going on, use your lenses. And when you use those different lenses, it's also allowing you to look at things with a different viewpoint. So you might see something you hadn't noticed before. This is important. Always substantiate your claims. So always make sure you're backing yourself up. If you don't give me the evidence to something you say, I can knock it down and there's nothing holding it. So make sure you always substantiate your claims. So those are very important to do when you are close reading. Again, we'll be doing close reading a lot in this class. It goes right in along with analysis. So keep questions in mind. Keep in mind the different habits of mind we talked about. And we get to go. Thank you guys for paying attention, for being here. And I'll see you next time. Okay, thanks. Bye.